final etude this year is number 15, A major by Kohler. So this etude is very cheerful and should be very fun to perform once your students have it under their fingers. So in preparing for this etude, practice your A major scale, full range, again, and then I also recommend practicing A major in thirds. That will be extremely beneficial for some of the trickier fingering passages. And your B harmonic minor scale. Again, I would incorporate double tonguing exercises. Just like with the first etude, you want to be doing your slur to, tongue to exercises. And then for this one, I would also incorporate exercises where everything is double tongued. So taka, 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 taka. There's a few great ways to do this. You could work on it on single notes, just ta, 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 ka, 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 ta, ka, ta, ka, taka, taka, ta. It would sound like this. With the metronome getting progressively faster and faster. Or you can work on it in a scale pattern. So you're coordinating the taka with the fingers. The same subito dynamics should be observed in this etude as in the first. So I'd practice them the same way with adding rests in between at first and progressively making them shorter and shorter. Your students should be using vibrato on the long notes here, but not in the 16th notes. So I want to demonstrate this with the first phrase. If I played the first phrase with vibrato throughout the whole thing. Had a couple wrong notes, but it also sounded like I was terrified the whole time, which is not what we are going for. So you want to use your vibrato on quarter notes and longer, but not on the 16th notes. You also want to make sure your students are very precise with rhythm throughout this etude. We have quite a few ties of quarter notes tied to 16th notes. I recommend practicing this, subdividing all of the 16th notes to make sure we get that 5th 16th note in there. If that 5th 16th note is cheated, the whole etude will feel like it's rushing and spiraling out of control a little bit. We also have some alternation between duple and triple. So for example, if you look at measure 9, I would have my students practice this counting out loud at first. Just 1, 2 e and a 3 la li 4 la li 1, 2 e and a 3 la li 4 la li 1. Then I would practice the rhythm on a single note. And then put it into the context of the piece. We always want to make sure that our triplets are not rushing and turning into accidental 16th notes. Pay careful intonation to, again, all of the C sharps and the E naturals throughout this piece. Again, using a drone and practicing this slowly can be very helpful. Let's take a look at measures 19 through 22. So these will be the most technically challenging measures that your students have in any of the 3 etudes. There is an endless list of ways that you can practice technical passages, and I'm sure you're familiar with a ton of choices. I want to demonstrate a few of my favorite ways to do this for you. So I'm just going to play the second half of measure 19 and measure 20. And the first way would be to practice it under tempo, all slurred. When you do it all slurred, you're really able to hear any inconsistencies or unevenness that's happening in the fingers. So important we make sure we get the fingers extremely even, because if the fingers aren't even when it's all slurred, the tongue doesn't stand a chance. So next, I would move on to dividing it into groups of 2, then 3, then 4, and then finally 6. So here's the 2s. Threes. That was 4s. Here's 3s. And 4s. And then finally 6s. And you notice when I'm doing this that I'm maintaining the articulation when possible. And then of course we have swung or uneven rhythms. This is probably the one that is the most popular way to practice these. Or the opposite. Any way that we can kind of cross-train the fingers through these passages is going to be really beneficial in muscle memory building and really connecting it to the brain. So the brain really knows what all the notes are and isn't just guessing. My final recommendation for practicing these passages would be to be able to play it from memory. It's just a few measures and it does go by quite quickly. So actually reading all of the notes on the page to most students will feel a little bit overwhelming. And if they can just memorize these few measures, that's an extremely helpful tool when they're performing it. So I hope that you and your students enjoy practicing these 3 etudes this year. I know that's a lot of information in a few minutes, and you probably have questions. You are of course welcome to email me those questions, but I'm also going to be putting up some resources on YouTube, on my Facebook page. I'll link to those as well. So if you would go there and type your questions in the comments, that would be fantastic. So that way I can answer them there and everyone can see them, because I'm sure a lot of the same questions will come up over and over. So happy practicing.